Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So I was trying to get in the middle of last year, in the middle of the panorama. And when I got here, Mr. Breyer, at some point, our previous middle school head, he pulled me in his office and says, "So we got to do the debates. Like, you do anything you want to, but make sure the debates go on." And I said, "Okay, here comes the debates." Welcome to the 41st annual Jennifer Fall debates. These debates reach all the way back to 1982, when the class of 1973 wanted to have a way to honor one of their classmates who died tragically in a car accident in college. These students sat in the classes here in the same halls that we walk today, and they had such wonderful conversations about the topics of the day, right? Take your mind back to 1973, and we can imagine some of the things that they were talking about around war, politics, and things of that nature. The very first year of the debates, in 1982, the topics were, surprisingly, handgun control and animal testing. While the topics have evolved, we can see that some of these concepts are age-long, and they continue to go, and they change little by little. Here's a copy of one of the first programs of the Jennifer Fall debates. A little bit of historical primary source here for you. This is Jennifer Fall. So, way back when, not me, because I'm only 22, but way back when y'all was in school, this is a copy of periodicals that will come from the library where we will look up these debate topics and come up with opinions on these different topics, for and against, pro and con. Of course, like I said, things have evolved and things have changed the way we study things, the way we research, the way we look at information. There's the inside of the book. So here's the problem. The problem comes when we're debating something like the death penalty, it's really easy to go to our good friend Google and find all the pros and all the cons of the death penalty. Right? So over time, our debates have evolved from just pro and con to open-ended questions that really get to dig deep and learn a lot about these topics and actually form really great opinions. There's that pro-con, right? So, what we got today, we thank you again for engaging in these debates. We are going to begin engaging in these debates. We're going to move forward with our debates. Our students have worked so hard. This is one of the few times at Sheridan where we talk about there is going to be a win today, and they are so excited to have that opportunity to win. I said, I've been telling them all week, there are no losers, but there's definitely a winner. And so we are working towards that. I'm going to call my colleague, my co-teacher, my friend, Ms. Eileen Pease, to help introduce our judges.
All right. Yes, there definitely is some irony that at a school like Sheridan, in the last academic endeavor of your time here, there are winners and losers. But there are winners, there are no losers. And we have three wonderful judges joining us today to help determine those winners. So first we have Indira Mertel, parent of Zephyr in 3rd grade. Indira is a discovery attorney who focuses her practice on technological legal strategy and tactical support. Her work spans a wide range of practice areas, including commercial disputes, intellectual property rights, white-collar defense, pro bono immigration, as well as landlord-tenant matters. In any spare time you might have, Indira likes to give back and enjoys volunteering at Sheridan, where she serves on the board. She volunteers with the Bethesda Friends meeting, where she serves on the child care committee and with her neighborhood civic association on issues of affordable housing. And she even has time for some hobbies like reading, pop culture consumption, and jewelry making. And also, like many of the students, she has a fondness for Wordle. All right, next we have Pavan Kuchandani, parent of Savan in 4th and Johnny in 1st. Pavan is a lawyer at his own firm where he counsels companies on labor and employment issues. He's also general counsel of Block DC, a family of property management companies. And he serves on the executive board of Block's Anti-Racism and Inclusion Working Group and is on the board of advisors for Birdseed, Block's housing justice. Sorry, when I'm up here. It's easier. That provides no strings attached down payment grants to Black and brown first-time homebuyers in DC. Hutton serves on the DC Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner as district commissioner, a hyper-local elected official that acts as a neighborhood's official voice in advising the DC government. He also works with Sheridan School trustees. And finally, we have Guy Nelson, parent of Thomas in 6th grade. Guy is a managing associate general counsel at Freddie Mac, where he leads a team of attorneys focused on affordable housing finance. Prior to joining Freddie Mac in 2015, Guy was a trial attorney at the Department of Justice in Environmental and Natural Resources Division. Earlier in his career, he practiced commercial real estate law, both here and in New York. He served as an attorney with the Department of Transportation and has worked as legal counsel for the University of Alabama. Guy went to Vanderbilt Law School, where he was a managing editor of the Law Review, degree from Hopkins in history, and his BA from Southern Methodist, and the University of Redlands, where he played football and ran track. Awesome. So we have 3 great judges, and students know what the judges are basing their decisions on. We shared that with them ahead of time. And without further ado, Ricky's going to introduce the first debate.
Are we ready to debate? I need directors to wear some shorts. Are we ready to debate? Yeah. Okay, awesome. The role that Jennifer Paul in the class of 1973 experienced at Sheridan has changed a lot. I'm sure communication management for teachers consisted of catching students passing notes in class. Today, the lives of young people have been drastically changed by 2 words: social media. Social media consumption is at an all-time high, and students are really engaged in the possibility of having conversations on this topic. Our students begin to realize, though, that many of the conversations we have had in class are actually being fueled through social media platforms. Students agree that while social media has so many benefits, 2 other words have eased their way into the picture: hate speech. In the following debates, students will consider how should social media companies moderate material on their platforms. Arguing that companies should prioritize banning problematic users is going to be Olivia, Jaden, Sander, and Josh. Arguing that companies should prioritize banning problematic content are DJ, Zora, Joey, and Miles. Give them a hand as they begin.
Imagine your child coming home to you at 12:30 a.m. on a Saturday night. They're crying, begging for someone to listen to their voice. I tried deleting their comments, but they just kept commenting and commenting. This is one example of the hate speech that can happen on social media. We believe that social media platforms should regulate their content by banning problematic users off their platforms, because users should be held accountable for their actions. Putting user bans in place will stop these problems from happening again and will prohibit misinformation from spreading. Hate speech is an evolving issue that has a strong presence on social media platforms. To illustrate the recurring issues that appear on social media platforms, the Council on Foreign Relations states that incidents have been recorded on nearly every continent. Much of the world now communicates on social media. Nearly 1/3 of the world's population is active on Facebook alone. And as you can see on this graph, cyberbullying has a presence on almost every social media platform. As more and more people have moved online, individuals inclined towards racism, misogyny, or homophobia have found niches that can reinforce their views and compel them towards violence. Malice due to online discourse has expanded around the world. social orders going up against the drift must come to an agreement with questions regarding freedom of speech and censorship on social media. This is all verification of how online hatred transfers into the real world. Secondly, while banning the user can help the company as a whole, it also holds the user accountable for their actions. Furthermore, according to Anson Alex, a trusted tech news outlet, states that although we may lose some of our privacy with social media, we may also become more accountable members of society and better people as a whole. As you can see, while your privacy might possibly be infringed upon you the slightest, what you are doing on social media won't go unnoticed and can help you become a significantly more accountable member of the social media community. To add, connecting to accountability, there are many ways in which people have expressed hate speech online. The most glaring evidence of this hate speech is through coded messages spelling out something that expects them to be true. One example of this rhetoric is when people use symbols and emojis to spell out the N-word or other derogatory words. These words simply just can't be tolerated, and for this reason, banning an account is very important.
Additionally, banning the user of the root of the problem and stop the issue completely. Online extremism has surged during the pandemic, according to the Department of Education. Things online have been going too far and have gone out of hand. There's another article produced by Vox, where Harwoman wrote, "We know deplatforming works to combat online extremism because researchers have studied what happens when extremist communities get right from their homes on the internet." One big study that happened was the 2016 study of deplatforming ISIS. When Ron DeSantis was looking in front of the subcommittee on national security, it said that there were 90,000 pro-ISIS tweets every single day. How should we expect the platform to be able to remove 90,000 posts each day? It would be much more effective to just ban these accounts because they were mostly the same people every time. There were an estimated 40,000 accounts actively supporting ISIS. In this study, we found that many members that were on social media had been getting their accounts banned to the point where they kept having to move to different platforms until there were none left. This is a good example of how banning the user worked in the situation to eventually get the hate speech and misinformation off of social media altogether. Lastly, banning an account can prohibit the spread of misinformation far better than alternatives, controlling untrustworthy posts and accounts. One example of discontinuing misinformation is the ban of President Trump. An article written in the Washington Post says, "Online misinformation about the election fraud plunged 73% after several social media sites suspended President Trump and key allies. Deleting Trump and some supported posts did not stop them from QAnon along with the 2021 Capitol riot. Imagine if these conspiracy accounts were deleted. At least 7 people's lives would have been saved. Bomb threats and hate crimes would have never happened, and federal buildings would have been preserved. Not far from this very spot on January 6th, the government was nearly overthrown, and it all stemmed from social media. Just imagine if those accounts were blocked early on. In conclusion, while some might believe that banning the content is uncomplicated and simple, easiness is not always the best solution. The only solution in our eyes is banning the user, making the overall platform applicable to all ages, while diminishing the amount of hate speech that surfaces out. Lastly, while banning the user will get rid of the problem immediately, it will also translate to others, holding themselves accountable to social media and understanding what consequences can come out of hate speech not allowing the act. Thank you for listening and your huge support and vote in our favor.
According to a transparency report by Discord, it has been over 2,000 extremist communities on their platform. But these communities and users continue to spread hate speech and violate guidelines. Social media companies have to prioritize banning problematic content over accounts. Before we begin with our first point, we would like to emphasize a key concept that we find important. Account banning is a much more severe ban than content restriction. Throughout our upcoming points, we will talk about human error and vagueness, which ties into the severity of an account ban in contrast to content. Through companies such as TikTok, account restrictions can lead to things such as restrictions on commenting, liking and sharing, and the overall use of the platform. completely ruining a user's experience, one who might not even be deserving. Please keep these in mind as we continue our statements, as we will be touching on these points throughout our presentation. Now, first and foremost, companies should prioritize banning problematic content due to these users being able to easily make new profiles. According to many cybersecurity companies such as NSTEC, National Security Technologies, many mainstream social media companies do not use software such as IP bans, some use device bans, and many have no restriction from simply creating a new account. An internet protocol, or IP ban, is known as banning the physical device. This is a much more rare type of ban, and while rare, this means that people can delete the app or find loopholes to gain access back into the account. Simply by using the different device, or even a VPN, you can gain access again. However, device bans are very different. A distinct percentage of these companies are able to ban devices, but by simply deleting and re-downloading the app, or by searching for a quick tutorial on YouTube, which there are millions of, any pre-existing ban is gone from the platform. Companies that do not use any outsider ban protocol, meaning that they are simply banning the account, not the device, users can easily create new anonymous profiles, continuing their harmful content and comments. According to Binghamton University, researchers developed a method to identify accounts belonging to the same person on different platforms, and found that being banned on Reddit or Twitter led those users to join alternate platforms such as Gab or Parler, where the content moderation is more lax. Also, among the findings is that although users who make move to those smaller platforms have a potentially reduced audience, they exhibit an increased level of activity and toxicity than they did previously. This all goes to show how not only is an account ban severe, but an almost useless way to restrict users. The whole point of the other side simply doesn't work. Secondly, not only does account banning not work, but account restrictions can arise from computer errors that may terminate users without their prior warning or knowledge. Let me tell you a story that we found on the Google support page about someone whose name is not publicly shared. We will call them G. G's 10-year-old YouTube account was hacked. The hacker uploaded 650 plus videos of bad nature on their account. Not even 5 minutes after this, they got an email telling them that their account had been disabled. The email did not tell them why, it did not give an explanation, only told them to look over the community guidelines. G was clueless. They turned to the Google support desk and said, I already made another account. The artificial intelligence that is YouTube's moderation disabled this person's account over something that they did not do. If it was just the content getting filtered, then the account would not have been deleted. Additionally, the person just made another account. The AI glitched and did not realize that no human could have uploaded 650 plus videos in a day. If there were better content regulation systems in place, then G would not need to evade the ban. Additionally, a lot of words are similar to other words. If the computer views it as a keyword and it decides to ban the account, then the person is banned for no reason. Since account banning is more severe, it is unwise to trust AI, at least until the technology improves. Another example that we found from the American Civil Liberties Union. Another example that we found from the American Civil Liberties Union talked about an attack on Al-Aqsa, a sacred religious group in Jerusalem. When people posted about it on Instagram and Twitter, they used the hashtag Al-Aqsa. The content moderation AI flagged that hashtag as a pro-terrorist group and deleted the accounts of all the users. All the awareness that people were trying to spread was deleted. As you can see, accounts shouldn't be terminated due to a mere computer error, but they should be restricted from posting flagged content and warned not to do it again.
Our next point involves vague community guidelines, a very common trait of social media platforms. Directly from TikTok's community guidelines page, the website uses words such as refrain from dangerous activities and do not cyberbully others. These sentences clearly show how vague community guidelines can be. What qualifies as dangerous activities? What qualifies as cyberbullying? As users have reported, things such as weightlifting or even doing a flip can qualify as breaching community guidelines. Should a user be restricted due to an issue with the platform's vagueness? No. Once again, tying into the severity of an account ban, a person should not face those harsh restrictions for a simple error of the platform itself. When there are vague content restrictions, you could get banned for something you didn't even know could get banned. Imagine if you post a picture of yourself and it gets flagged, and you get banned for something you didn't even know was bad. Another example is someone who uses social media and regularly creates and indulges in content about, say, BMX biking, decides to create a post in which they are performing an advanced BMX stunt. This could be flagged as safety violations or dangerous acts towards that person. This individual clearly did not have malice intent while sharing this post. Although user banning based on content can harm a creator who may have had an income or have been professional from this social media platform, intentions and actions is a very blurred line on the internet, and violating guidelines set by social media companies hardly accounts for terminating an individual's access to a platform. This can be tackled and put a stop to by creating warnings. An example of this is the warning that TikTok has in place for events like this, with warnings such as, the actions in this video could result in serious injury or adverse health effects, and the actions in this video are performed by professionals or supervised by professionals. Do not attempt. Most recently, the warning on the bottom of the TikTok video reads, the actions in this video could result in you or others getting injured. Truthfully, if an account continues to put out hateful or dangerous content, there may need to be something put in place to discontinue the number of numerous damages towards the online community. However, we feel that having account bans is too strict of a punishment before any warnings. To conclude, even though the opposing side may say that prioritizing account bans is the most beneficial way to moderate social media platforms, the prioritization of content moderation ahead of user moderation is important because it is easy to innovate an account ban. Computers can make mistakes and terminate an account. There are confusing rules on what can be posted, and the fact is, we are all human. Please consider our site, as this is the only suitable way to moderate content on social media platforms.
Awesome. Give them another hand. Now we're going to engage in a couple of questions. We're going to allow each team to present the other team with one question, and then we will take one question from the judges. We're going to start with this side.
The question my group has, do you believe that the account should be banned right away or there should be account strikes? And if you do believe that the account should be struck, would the content stay up or be taken down?
We believe that the content and the account should both be suspended, not permanently banned. We think that obviously there are mistakes that happen and there are like content that they didn't mean to put out. Obviously there are always faults in the system because it's technology. But we don't think that they should be permanently banned. We think that they should get warnings and like certain strikes and just get like semi-permanently banned until you can like contact the company and get like information about why they put a restriction on.
Do you have a question on the two?
Our question is, before you download every single social media app, it provides you with their misconduct and guideline violations. The problem is people don't read them. If people took time out to read the specific rules and guidelines before even logging into the app, then there would be no such mistakes.
Great, so I realize that obviously a lot of users will not read those guidelines. However, if you do, you would see that on, for example, TikTok, the guidelines use words such as refrain from harassment or bullying and refrain from dangerous acts. And as we stated earlier, these are very vague. I think we're expecting too much of a user to understand truthfully what the platform wants from the user. And I think that those guidelines would we need to make more specific for it to be truly used correctly.
Do we have a question from the judges?
I have a question for the red team. You argue that banning users doesn't work, in favor of banning content, right? And so what about, and the example you used was sort of the average user, someone that maybe, the example you gave of someone that had it for 10 years, so that maybe they make a livelihood out of posting content. What's your opinion on banning famous users? On Twitter, there's a very famous user that was banned recently, and his ban, there's been talk of his ban being rescinded if the ownership of Twitter changes. So what's your position on the ban of famous or notable users rather than the average user?
We believe that famous users are also like a very small class and elite of the general social media platform. It's a very small percentage of what really goes on when it comes to violating community guidelines, which is the topic of our debate. And we believe that those users may be able to create new anonymous profiles, and while they may not be able to create a new account that uses their name, the truth is that they can continue to post harmful content, and they should be treated the same as regular users, as they are not, special people.
Awesome. Do we have another question from the judges for the other side?
This question is for the blue team. You made some remarks about accountability and the fact that banning the user makes them more accountable. The red team rebutted that by saying that they create new user accounts. What makes it more useful to ban the user? The user can move and port their hate speech to another platform. What can be done there?
Well, when someone is banned, they are losing all of their prior platform and all of their followers. So most of the time when you see this hate speech, it gets really popular, it's because someone has a lot of followers. And if they get banned, then they're losing all their followers and they have to start over. And also, if someone keeps getting banned over and over and over again, they're just eventually gonna start giving up. And because at that point it's not worth it to keep just going back and back to the platform when you know that you're just going to keep getting banned over and over again.
Thank you. We are now going to take about 4 minutes to give each team time to prepare for rebuttals and closing statements. We will start with the same order that started with originally, so please can take the next 4 minutes and prepare your rebuttals. 4 minutes. Awesome. We're going to start with our rebuttals and closings. We are going to start with arguing that companies should prioritize banning problematic users, and then closing this out, we'll be arguing companies should prioritize banning problematic content.
You say banning a user is severe. However, you also say it's easy to create new accounts and come back. These points seem awfully contradicting. If it's so hard to, if it's so severe, then why can't you just make a new account? Also, community guidelines are easy to order and avoid. While banning the content can essentially stop anyone from ever doing such an act again, it allows members of a certain social media faction to bend the rules and regulations while still posting their mean and hateful comments. Take the F slur, for example, used to hurt and harm gay people, whether that be in person or online. On most, if not all, platforms, you cannot comment or say that word in videos. While this is the case, it makes it almost a challenge for racist, sexist, and homophobic people to spew their hatred online through coded messages, like we stated before. In a way, almost making it fun for them. And them telling themselves, well, if I can't spell it this way, maybe if I add another F, another G. We both know that people with the most hatred in their hearts will not stop at anything until they speak their mind, whether that be at the expense of others' feelings or not. To close, in conclusion, while some might believe that banning the content is uncomplicated and simple, easiness is not always the best solution. The only solution in our eyes is banning the user, making the overall platform family-friendly while diminishing the amount of hate speech that surfaces the app. Lastly, while banning the user can get rid of the problem immediately, it will also translate to others holding themselves, again, accountable on social media and understanding what consequences can come out of hate speech and content not allowed in the app. We hope you reason with us all. Thank you.
While it is true that people will and do evade content restrictions and flags, utilizing reports from people is important. People get reported all the time, and adding an option of content moderation engagement would be beneficial. Many people already know about using an exclamation mark instead of an I or a zero instead of an O. But prioritizing content moderation will allow more resources into better flags and better coded filters to less mistakes. Also, early in your response to our question, you said that accounts should be striked and their content should be taken down. You are effectively saying that you should prioritize banning the content before any permanent action is taken against the user. I'm curious how you completely agree with our side while still claiming to support your own. Thank you. All in all, we believe that prioritizing the ban of content over users is a superior method of putting a stop towards problematic posts. Users can easily evade bans through creating new accounts, and human error and vagueness causes unjust restrictions towards users on the platform. We urge you to support our goals and the prioritization of content bans to better combat inappropriate content and social media apps. Thank you for listening to our side, and once again, we urge you to support our statements.
One more round of applause for these two teams. What a remarkable way to kick off the morning, so thank you all. We're going to take a quick break before we start our second debate. Don't go far. Thank you. All right. You can head back to your spaces.
What's that?
For our second debate. When most Americans think of child labor, they likely are thinking about a concerning problem that happens in other countries. When these two teams initially chose child labor as a debate topic, their ideas were centered on issues abroad and mostly within the garment industry. But then they discovered something very surprising, which influenced the direction of their debate. They learned that there are loopholes in U.S. law that make it legal for children in America to work in the agricultural industry, which has dangerous ramifications for our country's children. Our teams today will consider what should the U.S. government prioritize to address child labor in the agriculture industry. Arguing that the priority should be making and enforcing laws to eliminate loopholes will be Ryan, Merritt, and Julian. Arguing that the priority should be creating programs to support low-income families will be Jen, Avi, and Liam. We will begin with our blue team.
Good morning. According to the Nation Agriculture Safety Database, every 3 days a child dies in an agriculture-related incident. This is why it is crucial to prevent children 16 and under from working in the fields. Creating programs for families in poverty does not stop children from working. We need laws now to stop child labor in agriculture. Children are easy to exploit and susceptible to dangerous conditions when working in this industry. To eliminate this, the government should prioritize making and enforcing laws to eliminate loopholes to allow children to work. by prosecuting and arresting farm owners and visitors that employ children, and also by hiring workers that can monkey trap on farms. The U.S. government child baby federal laws that keep law and program many people. Under the U.S. Federal Fair Labor Standards Act, children of any age can work an unlimited amount of hours on farms of any size with parents' permission, as long as they go to school. There is no minimum age of children work in small or family farms. This not only identifies that children at any age may be exposed to dangerous work on farms, but parent permission plays a big part in minors working. Minors under the age of 16 working in a business solely owned or operated by the parents or by persons standing in place of the parents can work at any time of day for any number of hours. As a result of this law, parents have complete control over the child's work. Another substantial fault inside the industry is that children can be easily exploited by their employers. Children are less likely to speak up and fear the paychecks we thought, and because children always question authority. Employers can take advantage of this fear and keep the children out of their paycheck. These children are way too young to like which makes them easy targets of work. As seen by research from Wake Forest School of Medicine blank interviewing child workers from ages 10 to 17, they said these children are pressured to work but lose little control over their nature or their hours of the work. These gaps in federal law that leads to exploitation of children from because farms not properly regulated or supervised. These loopholes that allow children to work in controlled environments can only be addressed by law.
Not only are children exposed to dangerous working conditions, but they also receive almost no safety training. A 14-year-old farm worker in the Wake Forest School of Medicine studies safety. When you're chopping a machete, they say, "Oh, be careful, let's not hurt yourself." That's basically it. The nature of agriculture work exposes children to many risks and dangers. Information from the National Center for Farm Workers' Health Child Labor Fact Sheet revealed that every year, approximately 115 children die in an agriculture-related incident, and nearly 12,000 experience a non-fatal injury. Those numbers increase greatly as time goes on, and they will continue to increase if Congress doesn't enforce laws immediately. They will also increase if the government spends money and time on anti-poverty programs instead of prioritizing the immediate need, which is abolishing child labor. Data gathered from the Human Rights Watch shows the perilous conditions within the fields result in acute poisoning, pesticide exposure that can lead to cancer, brain damage, and reproductive problems. Young children's minds and bodies are still developing, which is why this exposure is incredibly dangerous. Laws such as the Fair Labor Act are supposed to protect youth educational opportunities and prohibit their employment in jobs that are detrimental to their health and safety. But it has been proven effectively that agriculture jobs are unsafe and lead to injuries, and in some cases death. Agriculture should be written in law as a hazardous occupation, not fit for children of ages 16 or younger. Certainly the issue of child labor is due to poverty. However, the best solution to end child labor lies within the United States government enforcing stricter laws. Lifting people out of poverty is incredibly important. Our debate is focused on priority. Creating laws is a more immediate source of change and far less complex than ending poverty. In order to stop child labor in agriculture, strict laws must be enforced to forbid children from being in fields. Child labor is a worldwide problem, and we should start solving it here. Congress should consider agricultural occupations unfit for any child. If children ages 16 and under aren't allowed to work in the fields, exploitation, injuries, abuse, assault, and death can be minimized greatly. Thank you, and we strongly urge you to vote in favor of our side.
Picture this. It's 1902, and there is a 6-year-old boy working almost 12 hours a day in a factory. The conditions are brutal and dangerous, but he has no choice. He works for very little money, and he can't afford to go to school. All he can do is work. He can hardly afford to eat, and his employer doesn't care at all whether or not he lives or dies. He should be studying for tests, but instead he's working his fingers to the bone, accumulating medical bills that neither he nor his family can afford. It seems like a far-off idea, right? Wrong. Even today, many young children are still working in these harsh conditions, and something needs to be done about it. We suggest as follows. The priority of the U.S. government should be creating programs to support low-income families so that they don't need their children to work. The agricultural loophole that exists allows children to work on farms in grueling conditions. The Human Rights Watch has shown that loopholes in U.S. labor laws make it legal for children as young as 12 to work unlimited hours on farms of any size with parental permission. And there is no minimum age for children to work on small farms or family farms. The Human Rights Watch has also found that more U.S. children die in agriculture than in any other industry. Every day, 33 children are injured while working on U.S. farms. Human Rights Watch also tells the story of a 15-year-old child worker from a low-income family who was hospitalized after being sprayed with pesticides. Even then, his employer didn't teach him how to protect himself. Adequate safety training is essential for all workers, but children shouldn't have to do such dangerous work in the first place. Yet they can. Because of these loopholes in the U.S. labor laws, children are legally allowed to work on farms and make money. This is a huge problem because even though the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 restricted the employment and abuse of child workers, children are still working, and this law does not work. Plus, many people don't even know about this loophole, even though it affects thousands of children. Furthermore, according to the International Labor Organization, 22,000 child laborers worldwide are killed at work each year. But it is a problem here too. Hundreds of thousands of minors work in agriculture in the United States. Under a huge issue in U.S. federal law, children can toil in the field at far younger ages for far longer hours and under more hazardous conditions than children working in any other type of employment in the United States. To quote the Human Rights Watch, child farm workers risk their education, their health, and sometimes even their lives. This shows that the flaw in the laws banning child labor is something that affects many, many young children. With children being exposed to hazardous conditions, and many of them dying, it is clear something must be done. On this we agree. But simply creating stricter laws isn't the way to fix this issue.
Deprivation of money and resources directly ties to the exploitation of children in the labor industry. So to eliminate child labor, the U.S. government must first address poverty in families. According to a study conducted by the National Library of Medicine, it was found that children work mainly due to poverty. Parents experiencing poverty are forced to send their children to work instead of school, causing them to have a lack of education. Therefore, the main cause of children going into the child labor industry is due to the fact that the families are struggling financially. As you can see in this graph, only 5% of children willingly work in the labor industry, and 13% are forced. But the percentage of children that are employed due to poverty is 82%. 82% of children in child labor are there to support their low-income families. Let that sink in. Poverty is the reason behind child labor, so to end it, poverty needs to be addressed before putting in place stricter laws. The International Labor Organization estimates the number of working children is about 250 million worldwide, of whom at least 120 million are working full-time because of poverty. As you can see, 120 million children are subject to poverty, forcing them to go into child labor. If we don't address the problem of poverty now, it will get even more out of hand, forcing more families to send their children into the labor industry. That's why we will be presenting some ideas on how to fairly compensate families in the labor industry, because simply making new labor laws is not enough. Clearly, we need to get children out of the agricultural industry and into schools, and the only way we can do that is to provide adequate support. One program that is currently in place is the Child Tax Program, which can reduce the federal tax to owe about $1,000 for each qualifying child under the age of 17. According to the White House, families making less than $150,000 and single parents making less than $112,000 will qualify for the additional 2021 child tax credits amount. This is good, but families that are in low income should be compensated more. The child tax credit will help families get over the poverty line, but it's not enough. There must be more tax incentives for lower income families. Also, there's not as many tax breaks as there should be. We suggest that one program that will help low-income families with children. Our report made in 2015 found that the cost of raising a child was $233,000. That assumes the child was born to a middle-income married couple. When adjusted for inflation, the number rises to $267,000 in 2021, based on data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Things like affordable access to healthcare and better education can help get families above the poverty line. There are a lot of costs that aren't necessary when raising a family, but instead of forcing parents to send their children into the dangerous environments to get extra income, those extra expenses should be compensated. Also, it is extremely important that these stimulus checks are available to undocumented immigrants, because according to data from the USDA, almost half, or 48.9%, of all agricultural workers were foreign-born, and 27.3%, more than 1/4, were undocumented. Many undocumented workers don't have access to these types of programs, and those that do have access may have fear of using them.
On that account, in order to address the agricultural loophole in the U.S. labor law, the U.S. government should prioritize home-containing families via stimulus checks and other payments so that low-income parents don't feel pressure into sending their children into the agricultural labor for extra income. While creating more stricter laws surrounding the U.S. government, surrounding the issue is very important and should be done to prioritize by looking low-income families out of poverty so they don't resort into sending their kids to work. If the U.S. government put laws in place before helping low-income families, those families would suffer due to the fact that it is not an option to get the extra, much-needed income that is received from child labor. Plus, the desperate families will most likely find ways to go around these laws. Families don't want to send their kids into labor, but most of the time it's their only option. Therefore, we urge you to support our position.
Okay, now we have the questions. So red team will ask the blue team a question first.
Have you accounted for low-income families when putting laws in place?
Okay.
Sorry, could you restate that?
Have you accounted for low-income families when putting laws in place?
Have you taken into account low-income families when putting laws in place?
The effects of our purpose laws is that child labor will be illegal and that the loopholes will be closed. That is the priority. Certainly families in poverty who have children who work will be affected by this, but it is only a small group inside impoverished people. As we said earlier, the grant program is not the only one. We have stated before that we are for the government finding ways to end poverty, but ending poverty is not what this debate is about. It is about finding the best way to end child labor. An anti-poverty program will not make child labor legal.
Thank you. Judges. You can start either one. Oh, okay. Oh, right. Oh, sorry. Okay. Never done this part before. Okay, who has red?
Where would the funding for these programs come from? Would it be subsidized by other government programs?
Our suggestion is that the money is provided by the government, specifically the National Treasury Bureau of the funds. This makes sense because it is what has been done with the other programs that compensate low-income families. We think that more of these programs should be created, and the ones that already exist should be edited to provide more compensation to lower-income families. Therefore, the funds will come from the same place.
Thank you. Okay, now judges.
This is tough, I've got a lot of questions, but for the red team, you did a really good job explaining why poverty would, addressing that would ameliorate kind of the effects of child labor, but is that the only thing required to address child labor? The loopholes would still exist. So outside of the economic aspect, what are some other reasons that you see that would need to be addressed outside of just addressing poverty?
So we think that the priority should be to compensate low-income families, but once this has been done, we also believe that we work to create these laws. However, we do believe the priority should be compensating the low-income families.
Thank you, red team. Okay, one for the blue team.
Blue team, thank you so much for your remarks. I had a question about a comment that was made about poverty not being the issue. The red team gave a statistic that had 82% of the child labor problem owing to poverty. How can we address that with the laws?
We do agree that poverty is the issue, but we think that the main solution is by enforcing these laws to just completely eliminate child labor initially, and then after that we can look into the issues of poverty and how its roots are in child labor.
Okay, awesome. So we'll take about 4 minutes for the teams to gather their rebuttals and their closing statements, so don't drift too far, please. Started with the blue team coming back up for their final statements.
Looking at your argument, the program does not fully ensure that these low-income families will be provided with enough money and funds. We need to prioritize stopping child labor. You are not the only program that supports families that are either in poverty or have low income. We acknowledge that supporting families is important, but we need to focus on getting children out of dangerous work and letting them pursue their education. We understand the importance of lifting individuals and families from poverty, but we believe in prioritizing the enforcement of laws to prevent children from working. Of course, anti-poverty programs are essential, and we are for the government to find ways to end poverty. However, this debate is about ending child labor, not poverty. The best and most immediate solution for abolishing all the detrimental effects of child labor is by federal law. In summary, child labor is a major issue which resides inside the agriculture industry. Work is too hazardous, the children are easy to take advantage of, and working in the farms takes away from their education. Our laws are meant to shield children from working and emphasize the importance of education. But our current laws are flawed and incorporate loopholes, which is why we must adjust and improve federal laws to protect the children. We recognize that our opponent's solution is to create a program that supports low-income families to stop their children from working, but that is not a remedy to solve the problem. This program they plan to create is not the only one that is able to support families in poverty. Programs like SNAP and ACA already exist. As we said before, the more straightforward and immediate change is through laws and regulations. What we should do to solve this is to prioritize the government's role in ending child labor and correcting this nationwide problem. Thank you for listening and considering my side.
Resolving poverty might not solve all child labor. However, by putting laws into place, people will still be able to get around them, while poverty will decrease the reason for having to go into child labor. We would say that it might not solve all of child labor, but we are making serious dent into the child labor efforts. How would making stricter laws now be differently from what you tried to before? And you failed to stop child labor due to the government not being able to control what individuals can do. Our opponents believe that creating stricter laws will stop this issue from happening. However, laws made stricter before the issue of poverty in families addressed, families will suffer. Parents would not send their children into child labor if it wasn't necessary. So if the extra income is no longer an option, those families will not be able to support themselves. If families were more financially secure, they wouldn't have to send their children into labor. Once this is the case, the government should start to implement laws. However, it should not be the priority. In conclusion, you should support our position because the terrible issue of child labor is caused by poverty. So the priority of the U.S. government should be creating a program to support low-income families so they don't need their children to work. And as we previously stated, giving families the basic resources to live to avoid them having to send their children into labor is more important than creating laws to stop them. The priority should be helping instead of restricting. For these reasons, we strongly urge you to vote for our side. Thank you, judges.
Awesome. We give both teams another round of applause. We're going to switch gears here. We are 2 debates down and 2 more to go. They're just going so well. I'm just over here, and I am very, very happy and very, very proud of what we just signed here. Right now, we're going to take about a 10-minute break so we can switch gears. But before we take our 10-minute break, I'm going to ask Mr. Williams, our art attorney, who's going to come and he's going to explain some of the 8th grade art exhibit that we have going on up in the 2nd floor so that you hopefully take a chance to look at some of that work as well.
All right, shout out to the students. One more hand for the students. This is low. All right, so we have an amazing art show upstairs. Please take time to check it out. The students have worked really hard, so definitely bug them, ask them questions. Do you all have this sheet? You should have been sitting on it possibly. This is the rubric. It's broken down into 8 factors. First factor is a mixed media, so the students had choosing a variety of mediums. Paint, clay, spray paint, a lot of different mediums. So ask them, what medium did you use? Next is a social justice trigger. What frustrates you? What are your passions? What triggers you? Ask them those questions. In the art pieces, you can obviously see the triggers. There's more, check them out. I'm really proud of what they did. They had about 9 to 10 class periods, and they also worked on their legacy block. So give the artists a hand, and we'll see you on a little bit.
We'll start again promptly at 10:10. What time, everyone? Welcome back. Throughout the history of these debates, the concepts that students have discussed, for the most part, have stayed consistent. What has changed is not only the manner in which we debate, but the nuances of each topic. One consistent conversation has been the death penalty. Throughout our humanities unit on policing and criminal justice, this topic for this particular group has evolved beyond the death penalty into criminal justice reform. Today, we will debate and consider what is the most effective way for our criminal justice system to handle people who commit capital offenses. Arguing that the focus should be on rehabilitation and eventual re-entry into society are TJ, Macau, and Natalie. Arguing the focus should be on life in prison with no parole are Jacob, Ava, and Sam.
Can rehabilitation promise criminals another chance? When we think of criminals, we always think of bad people who deserve to be locked away their whole life. What if we could change that? What if we could change the perspective of criminals being bad people to criminals being people who need help and can get a second chance? We believe that rehabilitation is the best way to deal with society's worst criminals, and by giving them a second chance and a window to change. Rehabilitation will help them create good habits and routines and retain them, opposed to life in prison, which will ensure death. Not only is rehabilitation more effective, it is also a cheaper option instead of a lifetime in prison, and helps younger criminals learn and find opportunity elsewhere. First, rehabilitation presents a cheaper method compared to life in prison. The cost to incarcerate criminals is exceedingly massive and highlights why rehabilitation would be better. An example of this is according to the Legislative Analysis Office. The cost to incarcerate criminals in California is $106,000 a year. We are already using a lot of money to put criminals in prison, so exchanging the death penalty for prison time would mean all the people who would have received the death penalty will get life in prison. That would mean paying more money to imprison more inmates, which is something we already paid too much money for. And on top of that, the United States has the most prisoners in the world. So again, by using life imprisonment, we'd be increasing the number of inmates in prisons even more. Therefore, rehabilitation would cost less and would also produce less repeat offenders. Beyond incarceration, the mental health issue is also crucial in our argument. Secondly, the criminals have been known to have at least one psychiatric disorder, and rehabilitation will give them a second chance. According to Cornerstone of Recovery, an organization who focuses on rehabilitation, the number one reason why rehab is better than jail. You're a sick person who needs to get better, not a bad person who needs to be punished. Without treatment for those disorders, you're not addressing the root cause of the problem. Also, according to Clinical Guidelines Scope, it has been estimated that over 90% of criminals have at least one of the mentioned psychiatric disorders, including psychosis, anxiety, depression, personality disorders like ASPD, alcohol misuse, and drug dependence. What people don't understand is that people need help, not to dig a deep hole for themselves. We can help people get a second chance by treating their problems and by addressing them. Providing rehab centers as an option or next step would help prisoners reroute their own lives. We characterize the worst criminals as people who continuously disregard and violate the basic rights of others, and those we consider criminals are most often mentally ill. However, that describes people with psychiatric disorders. Do we condemn people to a lifetime in a jail cell without giving them a chance to change? Would we willingly choose a lifetime in prison if we also had an opportunity to help ourselves get better? Mental health is very overlooked and it can lead to all sorts of severe problems if left unchecked.
Furthermore, imprisonment intoxicates inmates with suicidal thoughts. According to the University of Chicago Press journals, the figures show relatively high and increasing rates of prison suicides, particularly amongst sentenced and notably life sentence prisoners. This is evidence of the fact that when inmates are stuck in prison, suicide rates go up. Also, the possible causes of these suicides are the fear of other inmates, the consequence of having to be in prison, and the loss of a relationship with the outer world and people. In rehab, these criminals are able to keep connections with their loved ones and friends, which will help them heal and maintain happiness. Also, they would feel free because they are not trapped in a confined area for the rest of their life. Rehabilitation will give criminals hope of living a different and better life, and will most definitely reduce suicidal thoughts. This is exactly why rehab centers are a better option than life in prison. In conclusion, some may say life imprisonment is the best way to deal with such severe crimes, especially because the crime could have been a capital offense. But what people fail to realize is that these people can be suffering serious mental illnesses, and we have to assess the root cause of the problem, and help these people who can be introduced to a new way of life. What needs to happen is to build and introduce more rehab centers targeted to criminals who have committed severe crimes. That will ensure that these people receive the necessary mental health treatment and education they need in order to eventually re-enter society and live productive lives. We hope you will consider our position towards rehabilitation and against life imprisonment.
How many people here know the term serial killer? According to the dictionary, a serial killer is a person who commits a series of murders, often with no apparent motive and typically following a characteristic, predictable behavior pattern. In the present day, the most commonly used way to deal with these people is the death penalty. Our side is here to argue that life in prison without parole is the most efficient option to society's most worst criminals in the event that the death penalty is not available. We believe this is because criminals that commit serious offenses are more deserving of a severe punishment than regular offenders and are more likely to commit repeat offenses if given re-entry into society. Additionally, the proposal of rehab centers is proven to be costly and ineffective. Firstly, the punishment of life without parole means that a serious offender or criminal is put into prison for the remainder of their life. This system ensures a sense of finality and rightful punishment while still providing time for new evidence to come to light and for prisoners to reflect on their choices. For severe offenses, we believe incarcerating serious criminals in prison for life is the best and most efficient option because of the gravity of the crime. Samuel Little was a perfect example of a capital offender whose hypothetical release into society would cause harm to the citizens of the United States. James Holland, a Texas reader, described Little as a sociopath in an interview. Little also stated that killing people was like a drug he came to like. Although the system is most definitely imperfect, we believe that the best option is dealing with society's most heinous criminals is life in prison. This solution provides closure for the victims' families while also keeping the offender alive, behind bars, and unable to commit more harm to society.
Secondly, the probability of recidivism is another reason why life in prison is a more effective solution. Recidivism is the likelihood of a convicted offender to reoffend. According to Harvard Politics, the U.S. has the world's highest recidivism rate at 76.6%, so we have no reason to believe that this percentage would be any lower when dealing with worse offenders. Re-released serious criminals, if this trend is followed, will also commit repeat offenses. Finally, we believe that the proposal of criminal rehab centers for serious offenders is expensive, ineffective, and risky. According to one study done by Loyola Law School, the cost of incarceration per year in America of a criminal serving life without parole is $45,000. If criminal rehab centers for the most serious offenders are implemented, the cost of holding would increase substantially in the years they are in rehab.
Additionally, as reported by the Department of Justice, our current system needed a $350 million increase for prisoner and detention program enhancements in 2020. So think about how much more money we would need to spend if we then added new facilities to our justice system. Rehab centers will not only prove to be costly, but also quite ineffective, because according to Twin Lakes Recovery Center, an important aspect for many people in recovery is to have counselors, support groups, and other resources like family members available for guidance and reinforcement of health choices. This may not be possible for society's worst criminals because according to the Psychiatry Advisor, our data show that a much higher percentage of serial killers were abused as children than the population in general. This shows that capital offenders like serial killers wouldn't have supportive family members to help guide them through the rehabilitation process. Put two and two together, and it is evident that there will be little to no emotional and mental help for these twisted, horrible criminals. In conclusion, the U.S., in adding rehab centers for serious offenders, would be implementing in addition to the criminal justice system that could eventually have serial killers and murderers roaming the streets really once again. While our opponents are arguing that rehabilitation is a better option than life without parole, keeping the offenders in prison would provide an appropriate punishment and eliminate recidivism before it can even become an issue with capital offenders. As we stated many times before, the risk that will be taken by letting capital offenders back into society isn't worth it when they can be kept away from other people without endangering them. So, we urge you to support our side, because serious offenders will likely recidivate, they deserve a more fitting punishment, and because the proposal of rehab centers will likely be too expensive. We thank you for taking the time to listen to our arguments and hope you support our side.
Thank you both teams for a job well done. We will begin with questions. We'll take one question from each team and 2 questions from the judges. We will start with the red side.
Are you sure that testing this form of rehabilitation with society's worst criminals is a good idea? Are you sure that testing this form of rehabilitation that has never really been tested before with society's worst criminals is a good idea?
Yes, we do think this is a good idea because according to the National Institute of Justice, the recidivism rate has gone down by 10 to 20% for the criminals who have done rehabilitation versus the ones who have not.
According to USA Today, there were 176,982 cases of robbery, murder, and aggravated assault committed in California in 2018, more violent crimes than in any other state. Also, as we said earlier, according to the Legislative Analysis Office, the cost to incarcerate criminals in California is $106,000 a year. If we kept putting these people in prison, it would cost way too much money. So why wouldn't rehabilitation be the better option to level it out? Especially because a lot of these prisoners probably have serious mental illness.
Well, to start off, you are focusing on one state, that is California. It's a big state that is
only one of many states where these processes are undergone. Additionally, you are putting money over the risk of letting these criminals back into society. Also, as you stated before, with the recidivism statistic, an over 50% recidivism rate for criminals that have committed serious crimes is, for us, is too big of a risk for societal health.
Thank you. Judges.
I had a question for the blue team. How would you address, and I think this is kind of what the red team's question was getting at as well, but how would you address someone who commits a really heinous crime? In other words, where would you draw the line between somebody who commits a really heinous crime and then being able to be rehabilitated? And to kind of follow up to that, what would you say to the families of the victims whose the perpetrators were able to get out of prison?
First of all, I would like to mention that ASPD is sociopathy, one of the most common psychiatric disorders in criminals. Not to mention, you can't have no sex disorders. Criminals have their own particular experts, and no, that is not an excuse. We also take and consider the fact that people have their own reasons for their own actions. So before we can judge, we should also be able to actually try to listen to why they consider defense in the first place. And as to drawing the line, I think the fact that they feel remorse or regret for their actions, or at least don't want to be like this anymore, we should at least try to help these people become better as a result. And if they don't feel regret or remorse, well, then we shouldn't do this back in society.
Thank you. Judges, do you have another question?
Both red team and blue team, you asked each other questions that were very close to the questions I was going to ask, so congratulations, really good questions. I'm going to pick up on one of them for the red team. Red team, you referred to and characterized the people that we're talking about as twisted, horrible animals. Kudos. And blue team referred to them as sick people as opposed to bad people. And so red team, my question to you is, how do you address the fact or the argument that the twisted, horrible criminals, not animals, criminals that you were talking about very often are actually sick and have a mental disorder?
We are willing to accept the fact that some criminals have a mental disorder, but a lot of rehabilitation that hasn't been tested and tried yet for people with mental disorders. The fact is that criminals or people with mental disorders, we don't know how to how to rehabilitate them with their mental disorders, and we believe that there is no way of knowing whether they have or can or will reach a point where they can be re-released into society.
Thank you. If both teams can take a second here, take about 4 minutes to prepare your rebuttals and your closing statements, we will continue in about 4 minutes. Rebuttals and closing. We will begin with arguing that the focus should be on rehabilitation and eventual re-entry into society, and we will close out this debate with arguing the focus should be on life in prison with no possibility of parole.
Rehabilitation puts on a lower chance of repeat criminals and recidivism. According to Begin to Read, a website dedicated to helping children learn to read, More than 60% of all prison inmates are functionally illiterate. Penal institution records show that inmates receive a 16% chance of returning to prison if they receive literacy help, as opposed to 70% who receive no help. This shows that most prisoners are already uneducated, and so if you put them in rehab and give education to them, it would benefit society so much. This stat already says that even without rehab, there is only a 16% chance for repeat criminals. So imagine with rehabilitation, the percentage will lower much more. If rehabilitation was introduced, not only would it benefit society and the inmates, it would actually also benefit the prisons. According to the Sentencing Project, the United States is the world's leader in incarceration. There are 2 million people in the nation's prisons and jails, a 500% increase over the last 40 years. As we stated earlier, life in prison costs more than rehabilitation. So if we use rehab to help these prisoners, it would take away prisoners from the prisons, which would mean less money being spent, and the amount of prisoners wouldn't be rising. This fact shows that it's not one or the other. Rehab would actually benefit the criminal society and prisons. Our argument today represents how criminals can be helped and changed. Rehabilitation is the way to help criminals get a second chance, opposed to life in prison, which would make their mental illness even worse. What should be happening is that prisons should start to assess the root cause of criminal behavior. Instead, they are locked away and being promised to live the rest of their lives in such a horrible state. Rehab isn't something that can redeem them. Rehab is something that can redeem the prison, and rehab will also help people realize that criminals aren't bad people, but they are sick and need help. At the end of the day, these are other humans who need treatment. Rehabilitation is the next step to evolving our society. So judges, we deeply hope and urge you to vote for our side.
Our opponents argue that rehabilitation will benefit the mental health of serious offenders. However, like we have said, we have absolutely no way of knowing whether these offenders will cooperate with rehabilitation, as replacing the death penalty with rehab is practically unheard of in the criminal justice system. Also, because of the previous stated recidivism rates in America that are above 50%, there is no way to know or predict that this form of rehabilitation will work. In addition, there's no way to ensure that serious offenders will be released during their time period and that these criminals won't recidivate when they are released from rehabilitation. This is why the focus should be towards keeping our citizens safe by keeping capital offenders behind bars, which ensures that risk is almost completely erased. To conclude, there is no proven way to verify that these criminals can and will reach a point where they can be safely re-released into society. Our opponents have also pointed out the matter of the price difference between our different solutions and argue that rehabilitation will be cheaper than life without parole. Their standpoint is ultimately flawed. By keeping these criminals in prison, we are ensuring the safety of our citizens and we are reducing the effects of criminals reoffending. There is also a chance that money could be saved with our solution, considering the cost of criminals if they reoffend. Furthermore, if the U.S. implements new maximum security facilities that double as rehab centers completely for these serious offenders, the cost could quite potentially become greater for our opponent's side. In the end, however, do not let all this monetary talk take away from the much more important security and well-being side of what the opposition proposes. The risk taken with letting these capital offenders back into society is simply too high when you consider their previous crimes, the safety of others, and the reputation our country would get if we released serious criminals from our prison system. These reasons alone should be worth far more than money to our opponents, and the fact that they are willing to put a price difference over societal safety should encourage you to support our side even more. Our opponents argue that rehabilitation centers are the best option. While some may say this is a good idea, their stance will not only harm society, but will also give America a reputation for releasing capital offenders from its prison system. Their argument, while somewhat reasonable, is flawed.
Implementing the system of life without parole is the best and most effective option for capital offenders because it provides a sense of finality, right, and rightful punishment, and it eliminates the probability of offenders recidivizing. We appreciate you listening to our side and strongly urge you to vote for us and take our arguments into consideration.
Another round of applause for these teams. We'll take a really quick break while they swap out, and we have our final debate coming up. So we have one final debate, and then we'll take a quick recess, and our judges will confer briefly before coming back to share the winners for all four debates. So please stick around. Okay, our final debate. According to Forbes, the term pink tax refers to the premium that women are expected to spend for specific services or products marketed toward them. In 1994, there was a robust study in California which found that dry cleaners charged more to wash and dry clean a woman's blouse than they did a man's button-up shirt. As a result of the study, the state passed the Gender Tax Repeal Act of 1995, which made it illegal for a business to discriminate in terms of pricing due to gender. However, many years later, the pink tax still exists. Under the large umbrella of financial discrimination based on gender, there are many different issues to debate. This final group of students wanted to do something related to pink tax and did a lot of research before eventually landing on their debate question. Today they will consider how should the government make menstrual care products more accessible in the United States? Arguing that the government should prioritize making these products more affordable and accessible for those who qualify in terms of income, Ethan, Maya, and Victoria. In arguing that the government should prioritize making these products more affordable and accessible for all who use menstrual products, Elle, Margaret, and Hallelujah. First up, we have the blue team.
Imagine you are a single parent of a biologically female child struggling to live on a yearly salary of only $17,000. You need to cover the cost of housing, food, clothing, school supplies, transportation, and so much more. Added to that are the expenses of period products for 2 people. The fact that for simply being born female, you have to pay $20 every single month for period products is outright unfair. Additionally, having children with periods is even more of a burden because it might double or triple the expenses. Our group believes that the government should prioritize funding to reduce the cost of menstrual care products for low-income Americans only. We believe this because people who can afford feminine hygiene products don't need the extra assistance, so it would be a waste of taxpayers' money, and there would be less money for those who actually need it. Lastly, the financial burden put on low-income people due to a lack of feminine hygiene products is greater than the burden put on their financially stable counterparts, because low-income people with periods often miss their work time because they don't have these products. The price of menstrual care products is a financial burden for many low-income Americans. The National Organization for Women states the average woman spends about $20 on feminine hygiene products per cycle, adding up to about $18,000 over her lifetime. These prices for essential hygiene products, while trivial for some, take an extreme toll on low-income people with periods. It is important to remember that this debate question is based around access. Financially stable people already have access to these products, meaning that if subsidies were to be given to everyone, it would be giving additional access to those who already have it, which is unnecessary. Additionally, the government has a set budget for how much money they can spend on funding this program. Using money from that budget on people who already have access would take money from people without. Focusing on funding for menstrual care products for low-income Americans is crucial for them to continue to make money to support themselves. According to WebMD, a study of nearly 200 women living in the St. Louis area revealed that 36% of the women said that they had missed days of work due to lack of adequate period hygiene. Imagine you are a woman with a period, struggling to make ends meet while working on the minimum wage. Missing 3 days of work can be the difference between getting your basic needs met if you're making a mere, $345 a month. Low period products cost money for all Americans, so low-income people deal with the additional financial burden of their limited access to period products, stopping them from making money.
Because of the reasons presented, it is obvious that we should prioritize financially supporting the feminine care needs of low-income Americans to improve access. We propose a government assistance program like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP for low-income Americans. According to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, the average SNAP recipient gets about $127 a month, which breaks down to only $1.39 per meal. While we recognize that this amount is hardly enough to support a person's food needs, it is still an important benefit. Like food, feminine care products are a necessity. We believe that a program that gives the monthly cost of feminine care products to low-income people who menstruate is equally important. Another way we could support the needs of low-income people with periods is through the funding for free menstrual products through the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, also known as WIC. The WIC program already provides funding to help low-income biological females with their reproductive health, such as its Food Package Program, a program that provides WIC participants with food that meets the needs of pregnant, breastfeeding, and postpartum people. One way that we could improve access to menstrual products in the U.S. is by including the distribution of free menstrual products in the WIC program. By doing this, low-income people with periods can have their needs met even if their needs are not pregnancy-related. In addition to these ideas, low-income people should be able to receive government-provided menstrual products in public areas such as libraries, doctors' offices, community centers, and pharmacies. This would be yet another way those who are struggling financially could receive help. In conclusion, some may argue that the best course of action is to lower the price of period products for everyone. Although this is theoretically a good idea, the government does not have an endless supply of money, and they need to prioritize the people who need the most support. The government must prioritize low-income people. One solution is to create a government assistance program for low-income people to help them purchase menstrual products. Another solution is to provide menstrual products for low-income people directly through programs such as WIC or in public community areas. Thank you, judges, for considering our side.
National Institute of Health, quote, the average woman will use 1 tampon every 6 hours on average, which amounts to 40 tampons every month. On average, women use 9,120 tampons each year, or $7,362 over their lifetimes. $7,362 on just one of the many feminine hygiene products. Our side is arguing that pink tax increases the cost of certain products that all people who menstruate need, regardless of income. This is why the government should make feminine hygiene products accessible to all who menstruate. This can be accomplished through a variety of ways, including having the government subsidize to lower the cost of menstrual products, making period products free and accessible across the country, and cutting taxes to lower the cost overall. Let's imagine you're a young person working as a cashier at your local grocery store. You're fresh out of college and finding your way in life, renting a new apartment, finding a job, and supporting yourself. Your average hourly income is $8.93. Let's assume you work a 9-to-5 job, 5 days a week. Multiply your hourly pay by 40, and you're coming home with $357.02. $13.35 are spent on menstrual products once a month. The pay gap between men and women is still narrowing, but not gone. Not only is paid less, but the time taken out of their work as they have to attend to family matters and menstrual matters is greater than men. This means less time to receive money to pay for necessities. When money is low, but necessities are high, people, mostly women, are finding it hard to get by comfortably. One way that the government can make feminine hygiene products accessible to all who menstruate is by subsidizing to lower the cost of menstrual products. In an article by the New York Times, it says that the government has dealt out $170 billion from 1995 to 2010 in agricultural subsidies to finance the production of junk food to make the price cheaper for consumers. The fact that the government has provided over $100 billion to just one type of industry over a span of 15 years shows us that they are more than capable of financing the production of other things like menstrual products. Just like they give subsidies to agricultural industry, they could as well provide subsidies to Procter & Gamble, a corporation that owns the widely known brands Always Pads and Tampax tampons. By doing this, the government could ease the burden of those who menstruate, because with the money they get, from the government, these corporations will be able to lower the cost of feminine products, similar to how they have done in the agricultural industry for many years.
If you still aren't convinced, here's another reason that proves why period products should be free and accessible for all who need them across the U.S. In Scotland, they have made menstrual products free and accessible for all who need it. According to an article published by the Scottish Times, Scotland was the first country in the world to make period products widely available for free, first in schools, colleges, and universities, then followed by wider access in communities. This shows that the Scottish government noticed that people were struggling with access and the cost of menstrual products, so the country made it accessible and free to everyone who needed it, not just people in poverty. This should be the case in the U.S. as well, because there's a very large population of people who menstruate, and it's already hard enough for them to succeed without having to pay for period products. As well as this, taking off tax for menstrual products will benefit all who use and need menstrual products. According to the KCRA, a television station in Sacramento, on January 1st, 2020, California's 92-cent bill was taken into effect. The bill stated that all diapers for infants, toddlers, and children, and menstrual hygiene products defined as tampons, specified sanitary napkins, menstrual sponges, and menstrual cups are not to be taxed. When this bill was in effect, those in need of menstrual products paid $20 less over 3 months on tampons alone. Eliminating tax will help those in need of these products save more money and achieve more in life. If implemented across the country, those who need it most will receive more of the necessary items they need, and those who are less affected by it will also have great benefits. In conclusion, some may argue that prioritizing people who receive a low income would be better to end the pink tax. but all people who menstruate need these products. As mentioned earlier, period products are a basic human right. The pink tax is a problem that everyone who menstruates faces, not just the people who are in poverty. Having the government subsidize to lower the cost of menstrual products, making period products free and accessible across the country, and cutting taxes to lower the overall cost would help all who need it. We urge you to support our site and help over 50% of the U.S. population.
Okay, now for the questions. So Red, you will begin by asking a question of the blue.
Our question to the blue side would be, how will you regulate which people receive free or affordable feminine products? Those who receive the products will be those who qualify as low income in terms of their state, and could you please repeat the question? It will be regulated by the state, and for our government assistance program, those who may be over the low income threshold and still be struggling can apply, but those who are not struggling enough to go to the extent of applying won't bother with that. So,
Also, the big reason that we made this program separate from the SNAP program, even though we took some inspiration from the SNAP program, is because the SNAP program's hard cutoff makes it so that people who can't afford that food, even though if they're a little bit above the cutoff, so they still can't get the food. But because our program will be based around each individual state, which we can have time to mention in our presentation, but because it'll be based around like how much money each, like what the cost of living is in each state and then each individual situation, it will be more personalized to each individual human being. But like, we're not going to give this money to someone who makes $100,000 a year. Like, why would we do that?
Thank you. And now your question for the Red team.
This one? Okay. Kind of going off what I said before, you gave an example of a person who struggles to support themselves while living on a low income in the beginning when you were talking about someone who worked at the grocery store. Why would we give that, so you were already saying that the support that we needed was there, like we were giving to, we want to give it to. So why would we give that same support that you were talking about to someone who makes $100,000 a year or someone who can already afford it?
We would give these products to everyone who needs them because we believe that menstrual products are a right that everyone who needs them should be able to access, and it shouldn't be, you shouldn't be excluded from what you're getting because of your economic status and how much money you're making.
Thank you. Judges.
Excellent job, Red Team. I have a follow-up question for you. You gave us the example of Scotland being a jurisdiction that provides menstrual products to all. I wondered, do you have any information on who in Scotland accesses those benefits? Do you find that everyone does equally, or does one group do so more than others?
We know that in Scotland, anyone who needs the products, regardless of economic status, can access them from like a library or community center or something like that.
Thank you. And a question for the blue team.
Sure. The red team made an interesting comment that access to menstrual care products was a basic human right. Do you agree with that?
We do agree with that, but the systems that we already have, such as a pig tax, there are more productive ways to deal with this issue because there's already like a long-lasting system where women aren't getting the support that they need. So while we do agree that it is a basic human right, there are more productive ways to deal with the mess that we've already created than giving it to everyone, which shouldn't be our starting point to actually improve the access, because we wouldn't be improving access by giving money to people who already have the money to pay for it, if that makes sense.
Okay, great. We'll take about 4 minutes for you to collect your rebuttals. Okay, we're going to begin with rebuttals and our closing statement. And the blue team will begin, followed by the red.
The opposing side states that subsidies should be provided for everyone. They make a good point that community products should be subsidized for everyone. While this might be nice, it is not productive in improving equal access. If everyone is given subsidies, those who are financially stable that already have access just being given more access by reducing the price. Remember, the ability to reduce the prices comes from the government, and the government does not have an endless supply of money. Therefore, that money should be focused on those who can't afford this monthly burden at all. Our opponents state that the government should remove sales tax from menstrual products. Removing the sales tax from products altogether, while a nice idea, is far from the productive way to improve access to these products. The cost of these tax is a small percentage of the actual amount spent. Removing this tax has more of a psychological benefit than a financial one. Of course, in theory, the government shouldn't be taxing people with periods for something that they cannot control. In reality, removing this tax won't improve accessibility to these nearly as much as removing the price completely for only those with limited access, low-income people. Our argument today is about the monthly burden placed on biological women that often interferes with their everyday lives, some more than others. It is crucial that the government prioritizes people that have low income to cover the cost of menstrual products. Action must be taken in the direct ways, such as the government providing menstrual products for those with low income, and other ways such as the government assistance program for those who qualify or apply. While we recognize that supporting all biological women with these expenses may be nice, it is providing unnecessary support for financially stable people who already have access. This takes away from potential further support for smaller groups of people. We believe that supporting those with low income is the critical next step into making menstrual care products more accessible in America. For these reasons, we strongly urge you to vote for our position. Thank you.
Our opponents have argued argued that this plan may not be able to be supported financially, though this is not true. The military budget is roughly $800 billion a year. Using a small portion of this money would not greatly impact the military. According to our estimations, we would only need $2 billion a year. I know that might seem large compared to the $800 billion the military gets a year. It's nothing. Although our opponents believe that only those of low income should have free menstrual products, affording these products is something that all who menstruate need. Period products are a right that everyone should have, regardless of social status. And the other side has admitted to agreeing with this fact. People in poverty will be provided these products as well as people above the poverty line because no one should pay for extra for period products. Again, we are not handing out money. We are handing out period products to benefit all who need them. In conclusion, our argument is about letting all people who menstruate have access to period products without the worry of spending a substantial amount of money on something that is a human right. Providing period products to everyone who needs them is a critical part for fighting against sexism in America's socioeconomics. We believe that distributing free menstrual products to everyone, regardless of income, is essential and vital to fulfilling our collective obligation to build a more equitable and fair country. For these reasons, we strongly urge you to take our argument into consideration. Thank you for your time.
One more round of applause for these groups. All right, please stay close by. Our judges are going to take a few minutes to decide the winner of each debate, and then they will come up and share with us.
That was a losing, right? I thought the imagery in your opening statement was very, very powerful and effective, and you bookend your argument very well at the end. And there's a statement in your rebuttal that you said, we know that people with hatred in their hearts will not stop at anything. So, I mean, your argument was really, really well sort of bookended, and I just thought it was very, very powerful.
For the red team, you did a wonderful job, and I would say that holistically, you guys succeeded in sequencing your argument very well, using your facts to persuade, and the result was that we felt that you did a great job in making sure that we were clear on what your position was. And both teams, we learned a lot from you, and I'd like to thank you each for that instruction.
I'll just say ditto on everything they said. You guys really did great. I think just very briefly, the blue team, I thought it was great sequencing of your arguments and also an excellent rebuttal. I think the one thing I really appreciated about the red team, among other things, was in particular anticipating counter arguments and supported your argument along the way. It was very subtle and sophisticated. We debated this, as we debated all of them, and who won. So after great debate among ourselves, the winner is banned content.
All right. For child labor debate, the team arguing to make laws, so the blue team, I think you very effectively used the statistics about child injuries and deaths, which, the red team echoed, they had to, right? Those were statistics. But I thought your use of those statistics to argue that child labor laws need to be stopped, child labor needs to be stopped, period. And then sort of a singular focus on that, that was very, very persuasive to me. On the red team, your use of the 82% statistic, And that visual that you had was really, really powerful, and it just stayed up there. To me, that was very, very powerful, and it led very well to your arguments, about addressing poverty as a solution.
I have a general remark about both teams, and it has to do with prioritization. You had challenging arguments, I think, because it's hard to be on either side of it. The answer probably lies somewhere in the middle. And what you both did well was posit or place your argument at the top. You may have conceded that your opposition had a point, but you didn't let their point overwhelm yours. And that is a sophisticated skill, and it's not easy to do that in rhetorical debate. And so I applaud both of you for that.
And similar to India, I think the thing that I took away from this was really, really good articulation of the problem. And child labor, both teams did a really excellent job, I think, of laying out the problem, which then I think points to the difficulty of the task of arguing one side or the other, but you did that really well. And laying out the problem that you were trying to solve for, I think in both cases actually really helped you further your arguments. I will pass it to one of my co-judges to announce this one.
And so, after heated debate, the split panel, as it were, we came together and we have decided that the priority should be making and enforcing laws to eliminate loopholes. And so, Ryan, Merritt, and Julia.
All right, third debate was criminal justice. The team arguing for rehabilitation, that was the blue team. I think I talked about this in my question. I like the characterization of convicted criminals as sick as opposed to bad. And then your argument to address root causes, I thought was very well stated. I also liked you used recidivism. I don't know that word. You all used it very well. Reduction statistic in your rebuttal response, and I thought that was really spot on. For red team, I really thought that your introduction just hit it, out of the box. Your positioning, it was very, very. Your whole argument was very, very clear, and your use of the Samuel Little example, I thought was really, it affected me. I thought it was great.
Natalie and Mikhail, I thought you did a wonderful job in injecting humanity into a system that is often attacked as being inhumane. I think that served you well in advancing your argument that rehabilitation should be prioritized in the criminal justice system, and that incapacitation and retribution may not be where we want to be as a whole. The red team, I also applaud your putting a face on the serious criminals that we were discussing. You did a good job of really defining that population and attaching a number, I believe it was 16%, to that population and letting us know what the potential effects might be if we opted to rehabilitate instead of incapacitate. And so for that, I thank you too for those arguments.
In this debate, I think with all of them, after hearing the blue team's convincing start, I thought that the red team had a chance. And we kind of went back and forth the whole debate. I think it was really effective. I think that the blue team was really good at, like you said, that humanizing, and I think the focus on mental health is very effective. I think the red team, it was a tough task to argue that side sometimes. I think you did a really excellent job, specifically focusing on the monetary and societal costs of rehabilitation. rehabilitation that I think helps support your argument. And the winner is... Sorry, I have it somewhere. It is... Life in Prison.
This wasn't easy, guys.
I should say one other thing, take a quick pause, that if anybody was nervous or anxious about this, it did not show, which is a huge thing in terms of public speaking. I'm really impressed. I certainly wasn't like that in grade, so to a person, it's just amazing. So we're down to the final one, pink tax. I thought the presentation of the blue team was in particular very effective. I think anticipating the arguments about why a broad-based access to mental care products was ultimately inequitable, I thought was a really effective way of presenting your case. And I thought the red team was excellent, in particular analogizing with other subsidy programs, because that made it very tangible and showed the kind of the solution to the problem that you were addressing.
Yeah, for both teams, what I really liked and what really affected me was the use of the examples. So I guess blue team, you use SNAP and WIC as examples, and red team, you use the agricultural subsidy and the other Scotland as an example. And to me, that was very, very effective. In particular, I like the focus and the singular focus on access that the blue team talked about, and then I like the focus on sort of the idea of equity for women on the red team. Andy's going to be able to announce it.
Yes. Thank you both teams. Ethan, Maya, Victoria, I thought you did a great job in going beyond the theoretical and actually going out and thinking about practical ways that this might work. Using SNAP and WIC as models potentially was great. Wonderful work there. And for Eli, Maggie, and Alleluia, thank you for your contributions. I think it was very well reasoned and argued. Your drilling down into issues around cost and affordability, I think really helped buttress your argument and elevate it. And so after much debate, we have decided that the government should prioritize making these products affordable and accessible to those who qualify in terms of income.
So this is my 12th year at Sheridan, my 12th year doing the debates, and Jay Breyer and I worked together for all those years, and the first couple years I didn't really understand the debates that well. He really led them, and then we partnered together a lot, and needless to say, I was a bit nervous of doing these without him, just because he had taken the lead. The last 2 years were crazy because they were on Zoom. But I had a blast working with you, Ricky, on these debates, and with all of you. We started big, and we came down to these 4 questions. You worked your tails off. We were on you, and we pushed you, and the fruits of our labor paid off. You were fantastic today. You were fantastic. So 7th grade, I hope you saw what is coming down the pike for you. I am no longer nervous about this. I am just thrilled to keep doing it, and Mr. Hill and I are going to push you just like we pushed this class. So 8th grade, this wraps up your academic year.